Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Today we are talking about sharpening jigs. Do you need them? Are they amazing? Are they worthless? Let's find out. So in sharpening you have two options. You can use a jig to try and get the edge perfect and straight and nice, or you can freehand it. Now freehanding is going to be much faster, but it takes skill and a decent amount of it. Anytime something takes skill, then it kind of becomes the hoity-toity way to do it, because I have the skill to do it and therefore it's the better way. In all honesty, once you're good at freehand sharpening, you're going to get it just as sharp as you get it with this. And if you're not good with freehand sharpening, this is going to get you a sharper, cleaner edge much easier. So it's one of those things that it doesn't matter. They'll both give you a sharp edge. One is not better than the other. One is not superior than the other. They both work really well. So my general advice is when you're first getting started, try freehand sharpening. You might be one of those people where you can pick it up really quickly. And I've got a couple videos down below that have several tips on how to get better at freehand sharpening. Once you get it, it's really easy. You just grab the iron, you go to it, 30 seconds, you're done, you're back in business. And it is amazing how much more sharp your chisels and planes are because you actually take the time to sharpen them, because it's a much easier process than setting the whole thing up. But when you're new, this may be the way to go. So I don't trust myself yet with freehand sharpening. I need a jig. Okay, which one should I get? Now, I'm going to tell you basically, this one from Veritas is my absolute favorite. Don't get the one that has the narrow guide and all the extras. All you need is the standard Mark II with the depth rail on here, and this is amazing. The big thing you're looking for is you want one with a wide wheel. You'll have some of the cheaper ones that have a smaller wheel, and those work, but they take a little more skill and they tend to tip around and you can run into issues. And if you're really wanting something just to get them sharp so you can work, this one works really well. So when you're sharpening, there's two different things that a jig is supposed to fix. Number one, supposedly it's supposed to make it square to the edge. Ooh, la la. And number two, it makes that bevel perfectly flat. There's no rounding to it. When you're first getting started, one of the things you're always worrying about is it square to the side? That doesn't matter at all. Don't worry about it. Now this one is off by probably about a 64th. It's pretty close. But I have some of them that'll be off to a full 16th one way or the other. It doesn't matter. If it's visually out of square, then you just put more pressure on the side that's longer and that will slowly grind off more. Even if you're using a jig, you can still change it side to side. This jig does not guarantee squareness. It will get it a little bit closer and make it a little bit easier, but this does not guarantee that the edge will be square, nor does it need to be. That's why planes have this thing on the back called a lateral adjuster. They'll take off a whole lot of unsquareness. So if you're out by more than a 16th, this will still fix the problem. If it's visually out of square, then just push on the side that needs more taken off of. After 4 or 5 sharpenings, then you'll notice it's out of square the other way. Well, then you push on the other side. And if it's visually out of square, then I try and adjust it during a sequence of sharpenings, but I don't worry about it. If it's not visually out of square, I never bring a square up to check it, unless I'm doing a video because, well, then you want to see it. But I never check this. Don't worry about it. Same thing goes for chisels. They don't have to be perfectly square to the side. It doesn't matter. Okay, James, cool down. Breathe. Okay. Yeah, I know I say that one a lot. The other problem that a jig fixes very well is that the bevel is sometimes rounded, and a bevel fixes that perfectly. Now, again, a rounded bevel isn't that much of a problem, but it does create a lot of confusion for the beginning woodworker, because you might have a bevel you think is here, but your tip is at this angle and your heel is at this angle, and if it's rounded, then you have to hit all of those angles when sharpening, and that becomes very confusing. The more you get good with hand sharpening, the more you can get a flatter bevel. Hand sharpening will always make it slightly rounded, that's okay. But you want to get it as flat as you can. It just makes it simpler and easier to always get that sharp edge. But a jig almost always guarantees that bevel will be perfectly flat. So imagine for a moment, I'm going to put my iron down on the paper like that. So my iron thickness is here to here. We got to make that a little longer, so we'll pull that out. And my bevel supposedly will go something like this. Now for planes, That's usually about a 30 to 35 degree angle, unless you have a bevel up plane, in which case then you're going to want a 20 or a 50. But for most bevel down planes, that's around 30 to 35. And we imagine this being perfectly flat, which is great because if we're going against a stone that is perfectly flat, then when this mates up with it, we're going to be taking off material all the way across. However, when we hand sharpen, we often end up with a bit of a radius. Now this would be a really, really exaggerated bad radius. And so right here at the tip we have almost 90 degrees, and back here we probably have something like a 20 degrees. And so if I'm trying to sharpen this, the only place I'm going to be sharpening is right here. Most of the time the problem is that people will take that iron and they'll actually bend it back so that the only place that they're sharpening is here to here. And they'll get a flat spot here, but once they get this flat spot, they're never going to be touching the tip. Or you could bring this all the way up to a high angle so that you're just hitting here, but then you've got this blunt front edge that's not going to work right in the plane. You want to be able to make contact all the way across. And that's where this jig comes in. So for a plane iron, I know that this is 2 inches across. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to put my mark on the 35 degree yellow, because I always start with the yellow. If you're using secondaries, then you have the green and the red for you. But I'm going to slide it over to the 2-inch mark, tighten this down, lock it in place. I don't want this to slide around on me. Then I can slide in the iron and I can pull this tight up against the side over here so that it's hitting this and tight up against there. And I can tighten these 2 thumb screws down on the other side and provide even pressure. I want to move them each individually until I get a nice tight clamp on there. And crank them down, put a little bit of pressure on it, there you go. Then we can take this off, and now we know that this is set at exactly 35 degrees. Now I chose this iron because I know it has a lot of problems on here. There's some extra gunk on there from other uses, and it's sharpened right at the tip, and so I'm assuming that the back half of this is at like 25 degrees and the front half is at like 30 or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a Sharpie and I'm going to hit the whole surface of this because I want to put ink on all of it. So now we'll take it over to the sharpening system. I'll put a little squirt on the coarse. This plate is for changing the bevel. This is for fixing problems. If you have a chip or if you have a ding, this plate fixes it. The rest of this just sharpens. So if you just need to clean up a bit, you can just use these. You don't have to use the courses. It makes it a little bit faster, but you only need to spend your time on this adjusting it. So if I have a lot of work, I'm going to do all of my work on this plate, all of your work on the coarsest plate, and then once the blade is the right angle and the right properties, then I can quickly sharpen it. 20 strokes, a few strokes in this drop, and we're done. So I'm going to set this on here and lay it down. So I'm going to lay this down on here. Thumbs come right behind the iron. They're actually on the wheel in the back. Fingers come forward. The fingers are putting pressure down on it. Again, if I want to take off more material on one side or the other, I put a little more pressure on that side. I will have the bevel sitting all the way across it, but if I'm putting more pressure on one side or the other, it's going to take off more material on the side I'm putting more pressure on. And then you just go back and forth. I'm going to go all the way down to the plate and try to use as much of the plate as I can. If I want to, I can flip it around and I'm going to reverse it. My thumbs then go on the iron. My fingers go back on the roller. And then we can see how we're doing. Here you can see all those black marks from the Sharpie, but the edge has no black marks on it. It looks perfect. I can slide my finger on it and I feel a burr coming off the back all the way along. That's what I want. I want a little burr coming right off the back all the way along. I want to see nice scratch marks going all the way across it. At this point, this is the appropriate angle on the bevel. Now I could keep grinding it until this is all the way back, but there's no use. It's only the tip that does the cutting. Everything back here doesn't matter. At that point, we're going to go spray, and I'm going to show you this in real time. So I'm going to put it on here. This is all it needs in the medium ones. There, and that's sharp and ready to use. I'm going to take it over the strop and just take the burr off, but if I want to, I could just use it on that. So we'll loosen this up, take it off, come here with the strop, I'm going to put it upside down just to flip the burr the other direction. 1 pull, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then go back and forth until that burr just falls off right there. That's happy. The jig is going to take more time to use because you have to set it up. But it is going to basically guarantee you get that flat bevel. It's not going to guarantee that it'll be perfectly square because you can put more pressure on one side or the other. It does help you gain... it does help you guarantee you get right to the edge you want. One of the big things you have to be careful though is if the last person to sharpen this was freehanding, it's going to have a bit of a rounded bevel. And so if you set this up at 35 degrees, you may only be hitting one section and not actually getting up to the tip. And in that case, you're going to have to grind for a little while until you get rid of this hump and you're actually grinding all the way up to the tip. It may be something like this where the last time it was ground at 25 degrees and then you're just having to do right at the edge. Generally, I don't do any secondary bevels. This one's really nice. If you like secondary bevels, you can just slide this up and down and you can put a secondary bevel on it a couple passes and you're good. I generally find that a couple passes and no need for it. Just do the whole bevel and it cuts pretty quickly. So, yeah, it's a personal taste. Different people like different things though. Do you need a sharpening jig? No, you can get by without it. You can freehand right off the beginning. It just takes a little more skill to learn, and you're probably going to hit a few more frustrating things. This just allows you to get a sharp edge so you can get working. It will help you learn freehanding a little bit because you start to learn the body motion and arm movements, and you can work on that, but it's not going to completely replace it. At some point, you might want to learn freehanding, in which case you're just going to have to jump in and learn it. It's a skill that takes some time. But this actually gets you there. It gets you there very quickly, and it's very easily. I'll leave a link to the Veritas and the Lee Nielsen and the cheaper ones down below. The cheaper ones work great. You just have to be more careful. They tend to tip because the wheel is much smaller, so you can end up rounding and putting a camber on the iron, which you may want to do on some planes, but for most, just straight across is all you need. I hope this answered some questions about jigs and how they're used and what problems you can run into it. They don't fix everything, but they do fix a lot of things, and they allow you to get a sharp edge, just get going at it. When you're first getting started, that may be what's most important, is just get that sharp edge and get to woodworking. And the rest of it you can learn with time. I hope you like that. If you do have any other questions or things that I didn't answer, throw those down below. I will answer all of them, or I'll answer as many as I possibly can. I read all the comments, but I can't always have the time to answer them all. So thank you for that. It does help out, actually hitting comments down below, hitting like, sharing, subscribing. Thank you. That helps get us in front of more people and helps the channel grow. If you want to take it one step farther, there are the patrons on Patreon. Everyone's scrolling over the side. They are the ones who are quite literally keeping the lights on and keeping us going. Without patrons and members, this channel wouldn't exist. We are completely supported by you, the viewers. So thank you for that. If you'd like to find out more, there are links to Patreon down in the description down below, or click the little join button and become a member here on YouTube. That really helps us out and keeps us going. So I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. Somehow I always imagined myself dying, being drawn and quartered and yelling out, "Free!"